prejudices, and personal investments, even if the producer is not the public face of the program. In 1989, I was a young out producer working on every step of the media generating process is subject to what Stuart Hall calls the common sense of the producer. That is to say, the process is subject to the producer's values, prejudices, and personal investments, even if the producer is not the public face of the program. In 1989, I was a young out producer working on public affairs shows at WNET in New York. Media coverage around HIV/AIDS at the time was virtually invisible. Friends and colleagues were dying without representation. I pitched my executives a show about the art world's response, a project initiated by Visual AIDS called Day Without Art.
We felt perhaps that there was a way in which the language of art could say something, not just to our small community, but to the general population about this AIDS crisis.
That's why this one day of awareness, visibility, non-visibility.
And we decided to call it a Day Without Art.
The objective is to prompt the government into a more strenuous action because it's really something that affects everybody.
We take something away that you expect to find, but we also want people to look around them and think, to feel for the other person, the person next to them.
In producing this program, researching, identifying people to interview, shooting segments, and editing the footage to tell the story, I found my voice as an artist, activist, and journalist. I was moved by AIDS activists who took to the streets and demanded government response to the epidemic. Artists were politicizing their sexual and racial identities in their work and being denounced on the U.S. Senate floor.
AVA is funded in part by a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. What a disgrace.
The amendment addresses the controversy surrounding the use of federal funds by way of the National Endowment for the Arts to support so-called works of art by Andres Serrano and Robert Mapplethorpe. This amendment would prevent the NEA from funding such trash in the future.
The Helms Amendment would have basically hit at the main mission of Art at Space. Most of the artwork we show is offensive to someone in one way or another, and many forms of art are very difficult for this notion of a homogeneous general public to understand.
Jesse, you own art! Keep your hands off my art!
The AIDS crisis and the culture wars had collided. As a son of activists and freedom fighters, also an Ivy-educated black gay male raised in the Bronx, as well as East Africa, it was important for me to creatively show how HIV/AIDS impacted my communities. Groups usually marginalized by mainstream culture: queers, people of color, women, artists, activists, and our youth.
Eric is this guy I've been dating, you know, but he's the reason why I'm here in this doctor's office. I'm here to take some kind of AIDS test that I don't know much about. See, Eric was a drug dealer, and I knew that. You know, I mean, the money had to come from somewhere. The earrings, the watch. But what I didn't know was that Eric was doing the drugs. You know, I mean, he was shooting up. So I called him, and he said, hey, you know, I'm not worried. Don't worry about it. So he's not worried about me. You know, I mean, I thought he loved me. He said that he loved me. I mean, I'm 14. How am I supposed to deal with all this? My particular character gets questions about how it happened. A lot of people ask about the difference between HIV and AIDS, how you get the virus. I mean, one of the things that we try and talk about at START more than anything is that it's okay, your decision to have sex or not. You know, that's something that's very individual. And as long as you take the right precautions, it's an okay decision.
Almost 30 years later, the young Kerry Washington I booked for a show on teens responding to AIDS is now a major star in a show about a woman having an affair with the president. The real scandal is that the NEA is still threatened with defunding, and HIV/AIDS in lower-income communities of color is still largely ignored. A program entitled The Changing Face of the AIDS Epidemic provoked particularly harsh criticism.
With us now is Lou Katoff, a person who's been living with AIDS for more than 5 years and is currently conducting a study of long-term survivors. Vilma Santiago, living with AIDS since 1986 and a member of the People with AIDS Coalition. Dr. Iris Davis, an internist at New York Hospital. and Dr. Jeffrey Vieira, Chief of Infectious Diseases at the Brooklyn Hospital Center.
The program fleshed out different perspectives on AIDS in an engaging manner, but also allowed people from different communities to dialogue with one another.
I had GYN doctors discriminate me because of my background and having the disease. I have so many of them. I think they should try to be more compassionate to our disease and deal with that. And I have these interns that we have them every 3 months that they don't know what they're doing. And if you try to educate them, we're supposed to be wrong.
My executives called the program a failure. They didn't understand Vilma and said I showed poor judgment in booking an inarticulate woman because Vilma didn't speak like the college-educated white gay male sharing the table with her. For me, it was a success to show how a black female doctor validated Vilma's experience.
HIV is a highlight for all issues dealing with medicine. So when Vilma tries to describe to you her trial experience, you have to remember that 97% of the trials designed for HIV disease were designed for males, predominantly white males of a certain socioeconomic section.
Soon after, I left public television. I needed to break out of the constraints and invisibility I felt as a broadcast producer in corporate media, to explore issues of power, body, and fantasy in a more public yet personal way as an artist, to open up more progressive conversations around safe sex and self-love, post-colonialism, and representation. Things I wish I had a place to discuss and explore as I grew up and came out. In 28 years, we can trace momentous change. Yet African Americans still represent the highest new incidences of HIV infection and are dying in disproportionately higher numbers. An ongoing epidemic worsened by persistent neglect, still ignored by the media, the medical establishment, and the state. I'm still exploring the ways we can see our beauty and our value. To love ourselves more deeply and engage with each other with fullness so that we can see that our lives are worth saving and fighting for.